Hey, hey, hey. All right. So, do. I think I may have gotten it. And my guest actually was in not such a great area for service. So, hopefully he will be able to hop on and we can get it started. Let's see here. Just waiting for my guest. What is it? Sorry, it's like dead air. So I could sing. Don't want to see me dance. I have 2 left feet. And yeah, I'm just waiting for my guest. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. I'm not sure if he's having some technical difficulties also. Was just kind of in a bad area. He was traveling today, so sorry everybody. We'll get it. We'll make it work. See this, please. I may end up having just to call him in on my end, because I don't know that he is able to hop on. I think my daughter, did you just Snapchat me? Oh. Oh, there it is. Hold on. Whoa. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Let's see here. So, let me see. How do we... Can you go on yours and see? Yeah. I know.
Because I just called you, that's all.
Oh, I see. Okay. Let's see if maybe we can just do that. Because there is an option to screen share. So,
I can see you.
who said that? Oh, hi. I can see. Okay.
Yeah, that was me. That was me.
Okay. Let's see here.
I can't see him on there. I can only see you.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. Why it's not letting you hop on.
So should we end this call then and see what else happens? Because I don't know what else to do, to be honest with you. It's just kind of fumble around with it.
Well, if you can hear me, and I don't know if the people watching can hear our conversation.
I can hear you.
Over the phone. Okay, so we can just move forward this way. I'm totally fine with that. If you're okay with that.
Yeah. Are we seen though on?
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe somebody should message me who knows how to do this. But if our viewers can hear you via telephone, I can see you, but I just can't get you on the screen for some reason. Let's see. Okay. Well, I think if it's going to work this way, then that's cool. And then we'll just figure it out a better way for next time. You okay with that?
Yeah, something just happened. My Bluetooth went out, so I don't know if that's, maybe you did do something, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you perfectly. It's nice and loud and perfect.
Yeah, and I just heard that somebody messaged you, but
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. So, I think we will be good to go. They just won't be able to see you. I can see you, but I don't think anybody else can. But it's fine. So, I guess we can just kind of get started. This is our very first recovery roundtable session. I know it doesn't look like a roundtable, but metaphorically, speaking, we're sitting here together virtually, and just real quick, want to do an introduction. My name is Brooklyn Maxon. I am the Tribal Opiate Response Outreach Specialist with Standing Rock Sioux Tribe under the SAMHSA grant. And I am from Running Antelope District in Little Eagle, South Dakota. My mother is Juanita Shenandoah Maxon, and my father is the late Ken Maxon of Running Antelope District. And if you want me to go back generations and generations, I could do that. But since we've already taken up everybody's extra time, I just want to kind of get to it, if that's okay. And then I want to introduce my guest today. And I'm sorry that we can't make the video work to add him in. But hopefully you guys can all hear. So my guest today is Maxon-Pacheco O'Connor, and he hosts the Relatives in Recovery. So I'll let him introduce himself a little more, and then we can get started. Sound good?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. How Mataki-api. Santewa na Pechu Zapalo, Michael Patrick, Wambadi Gadeska O'Connor, Amachi-api, na Hangtuan Nakota, Himachi-alo. I come from the Hangtuan people. I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I'm been sober for quite a while, 27 years to be exact, and some change too. And it's difficult because I am on the road now. I am literally about an hour outside of Spokane, Washington, kind of pulled over. So this is pretty cool. So I want to thank you, Brooklyn, for inviting me, and say hello to all the relatives out there. If you can hear, it's just good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your introduction. And it's amazing to hear, your long-term sobriety. And I know that doesn't always come easy for everybody. And so, real quick though, I would like to just kind of start out. Before we start our conversation, I want to just do a prayer, because I know that's our way. When we come together, we pray together for good things, and I want to continue that tradition. And so we'll just get started. So, wakanta ka, Lord God, Heavenly Father, Creator, whichever name our loved ones and our relatives call you by, we ask you today to watch over us, to give us good health, to be with everybody, and provide strength to those that are struggling, to those who are continuing their journey to recovery, and those who are struggling on the sidelines as family members and loved ones. We ask that you give us all strength to overcome this in a good way, and we ask that you bless us, give us strength from the top of our head to the bottom of our feet to our heart, and let us go on in a good way. And so brief. I don't usually give prayer because I'm always one of the youngest in the room, so I apologize if it's kind of awkward. Hey. So we'll just jump into it. Thank you again, everybody, for being so patient. I was really excited for today, and I was really excited to get Michael on our Facebook Live just to talk about his relatives in recovery and his story. And yeah, so without any more stalling, I guess I will just invite Michael to tell us about you. Share with us your testimony. Share with us, what you've been through and your journey to recovery. And you can go back as far as you want to, where it began. So I will give you the mic.
Sure. Thank you, Brooklyn. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I imagine you can.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I hope all the relatives that are out there that are going, like you said, that are going through a hard time, kind of feel people out there that are listening or maybe even watching, and ask for your support as well. So trying to find the right words here. Addiction and alcoholism, it runs pretty deep, like in my Tioshwe, my Tiwahe, just like a lot of our people as well. It runs very deep, and I don't know if any of my family are watching or not, but they're not really big into Facebook. So some of the things that I'm going to share are very personal, but I've learned how to open up and become honest in my life with myself and to live that way. So sobriety has been beautiful. It's been wonderful, but certainly addiction and active alcoholism has really, I would say, in my own opinion, my own humble opinion, really almost destroyed my family. Decimated my family, been very cruel to my family. And so, I say with a broken heart, very much a broken heart. It's no ego at all that I'm the only one in my family that is sober. And the only reason I say that is I hope that somebody out there that is going through that as well, that feels lonely because they're having change or they're wanting change, but yet in their heart they want that, but yet they're surrounded by addiction, that they might hear me and be able to say, feel encouraged by that. And so I grew up around it. Mom was an alcoholic from, I think, for a very long time. We have a lot of secrets in our family, and so I'm going to sort of, out of respect for my family, just try and do the best that I can. But even on my dad's side, it's like that too. I never got to know my dad because he died after serving in Vietnam. He died in a pretty brutal car crash that I get, that was kind of that's how our people die, basically, I would say. At least that's how he died. I hardly ever talk about it, so I'm trying to find the right words. And so the expectation, I think, in my family was to the trajectory, so shall I say, if you took an arrow and you fired it off into that direction, that's the direction that I would have probably have went, and that I did go for a number of years. I never wanted to become an alcoholic. I never wanted to become a drug addict. I wanted to, I wanted to escape. Life was very hard growing up. I feel like I've always had a broken heart from the get-go, and because for a lot of reasons, I got a lot of issues. Let's just say that. Let me just be honest with you. I got a lot of issues, growing up around that. It's, you're going to have issues, and I know that I'm not alone in that. And so I grew up around a lot of violence, a lot of anger, a lot of alcohol and drug addiction and things such as that, and a lot of things that weren't supposed to be there, such as abuse and toxic and very low, poor self-esteem, poor self-image. Because back then in small town South Dakota, it was very dangerous to be Native American, and I did my best to be able to fit in, and I wanted to be white at one time. That's how bad it was for me anyway, because growing up that way, being the only family off the reservation in a school full of Washichu relatives, it was very difficult. So I remember at a very young age, it doesn't take a brain scientist. Very young, I began to understand that the drinking was dangerous, that when people were drinking, I didn't want to be around them. And so I spent a lot of time isolating. And then, the things that people consider a success, like academically, I was a good athlete, but I was just so preoccupied with with what was going on in my own life, that I grew up having a hard time associating with people. But when I drank, I could be social and stuff like that. So at a very young age, I told myself that I would never drink, I would never do drugs, and I would never do something like what was happening in the home, and I would never do that. But I'll tell you what, it was at Flanger Indian School, Flanger, South Dakota, that I discovered the mind changer and how it affected me, and that it felt really good. And for the first time in my life, people talk about, when they share their stories, they say, when I drank, I felt like magic happened. When I drank, I felt like, I went into a whole nother dimension. Well, when I drank, my first experience, I felt normal for the first time in my life, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't consumed by fear. I felt like I could be myself, and, and that was the hook. And despite all the consequences that started to occur in my life at a very young age, I didn't really have anything else. I didn't have culture in my life. My goals as becoming a baseball player, becoming a good person. I grew up a criminal. And so, alcohol and drug addiction kicked in real fast. And I became a high school dropout at a young age, and then I started trying to just basically couch surf, losing job after job. And I started at a very young age. I also had a lot of suicidal thoughts as well. And so at least when I drank at first, I didn't feel that way, because I felt alive. When I started doing drugs, I felt alive. I was at least having fun, for crying out loud, for the first time in my life. And so, that's a lot to give up. And despite the consequences that were beginning, I just, I didn't have anything else in my life. And, So I don't know if you have any questions. I don't want to take up too much time. If you want to jump in there with some questions or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but I actually would like to allow some time to open up the floor for questions. If there's anybody in today's audience that has any questions, anything related, or, you know, I don't know how personal you want to get, Michael, but I know sometimes, you know, there are really hard questions that people out there have, and it's hard to ask. You know, I've, for myself, have experienced, you know, certain things that come along as a family member, a friend, of a loved one that is in addiction, you know, in alcoholism. And so, I mean, it's just, it's a really difficult topic sometimes. And the other thing, you know, I want to just mention is that, you know, sometimes when we have these discussions and moving forward, when we have these discussions, there may be things that come up that are triggers for other people. So I do want to be really mindful of that. If it's something that you just, as a viewer, it's starting to make you really uncomfortable, and it's starting to, you know, maybe trigger you, please feel free to reach out, and I will definitely get you in contact with some support people that can kind of help work through that if it's something that you're struggling with at the time. And don't feel bad, you know, if you need to turn the camera off and take a break. I mean, this is just for informational purposes. So I just want to be really, really mindful of all of our audience members. And so, but yeah, I will allow a little bit of time. If anybody has any questions, then just feel free and type it in the comments, and I will see it, and then we will come back to your questions. But I did write down a couple of things that came up. I had the pleasure of being able to join KLND Radio the other day with some of my colleagues, and it was really great. Really nervous, but it turned out really good, and we had some good discussion with the host at the radio show there. So that was pretty cool. But we did have a caller after we went off live radio, and so it was an elderly gentleman who was also in recovery. He did share with me, I'm not going to mention any names, but he did share with me that he had been sober for quite some time, and his sober birth date was March 9th, 1976. So it has been some time, and so you know, it's pretty it's nice to know that there's people out there that are, you know, these grassroots in recovery, actively practicing recovery. And so what are your thoughts on this? I did hear this one time from a colleague of mine who is, I guess, specializes in more of the therapeutic realm of everything. And they told me that there is a difference between, and again, this is just something that was shared with me, but there's a difference between an individual who is sober and an individual who is in active recovery. And is that something that anybody has ever asked you about, or has that ever been a topic of discussion for you, Michael? I don't know.
Yeah, because there's a big difference between somebody who doesn't have a problem with alcohol or drugs, or who just simply doesn't drink. And so that could be, I mean, there's a couple of things to talk about there. A couple of good points that could be made is that, one, maybe I don't have a problem with not drinking or not drugging, or that's never really been a part of my life. So staying sober has kind of been like I've always been sober. You know what I mean? Whereas somebody who is in active recovery, more than likely, is somebody that has had an addiction, and when you have addiction, typically you've been through the ringer, and a lot of us, we've grown up in alcoholic homes. However, I know people who whose parents never, even touched alcohol, or they were able to drink or do drugs socially. And so somebody that's in active recovery is typically, from what I understand, I consider myself somebody that's in active recovery. That, from my own perspective, that means that when I'm sober, if I just say that I'm sober, I know they're just words, but they're kind of like words that kind of put things in perspective and sort of kick me in the rear or motivate me. So it could mean different for a lot of people. I mean, I'm sober today, but there's been times when I drifted away from the program. Not very often, and I kind of learned the hard way. And when I talk about program, I'm talking about AA, I'm talking about Wellbriety. I just came from an Al-Anon conference in Portland, Oregon. And so typically somebody who's in active recovery, I think probably somebody would, I think that my understanding is that you're working some sort of 12-step recovery program, whether it be, and also introducing like spiritual components as well, because somebody that's sober may not understand addiction, may not be able to relate with the fact that, hey, I've been drinking and I've been drugging, and because of that, I've had all these consequences, and I have this long criminal record, and I've been abusive. I have multiple DUIs, whereas somebody that's sober may have never experienced any consequences in their life, and they can kind of take it or leave it. Somebody who is acting in recovery typically is somebody who basically hits rock bottom and reaches out for help through a treatment program, maybe through a probation or the courts. Typically, we don't come into the 12-step programs because our life is going good. Usually our life has fallen completely apart, and we're either on the verge of dying, or we've lost everything, or we're just in so much pain that we start to take a look at our drinking and our drugging behavior. And that's sometimes different from somebody who is sober, because a lot of people are sober, they just don't drink. Mm-hmm. But for a drug addict or an alcoholic, it's different, because we've used even the term sobriety as something that may have been completely out of reach for me. Like, I could never see my life as being sober, but through active recovery and active recovery from addiction, I come to find out that there are a lot of people out there who are also experienced everything that I have experienced, and are going through the same things that I'm going through in recovery, because active recovery is a whole nother beast. Stopping doing drugs, alcohol is one thing, but active recovery, that is a whole nother, that's a whole nother, I don't know what you call it. I'm kind of a lack of words. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a whole nother task, or not really task, but journey, right? I guess that's the word I'm thinking in my head. And so, I do like that you mentioned that there are people out there that, sometimes it takes for them to hit rock bottom. And so, I guess, if it's okay that I ask you this, is that something that you experienced, or did you turn this corner, or decide to take this journey because of something else?
No, I hit rock bottom. It happened February 15th of 1995. That is my sobriety date. and February 14th is my belly button birthday. And I was looking at a court date for second-degree burglary. Like I said, I've been a criminal all my life. I've never known up until that point what it was like to obey the law and to talk and volunteer and go to church or go like I've been a criminal all my life. That's just the way it was. And so for me, by that time I was a father, and I had never trusted or deeply loved anybody or displayed love. I loved my family, but I was fearful. We didn't go around hugging each other and saying we loved each other like we do now, but back then I was just completely afraid of any sort of I was just afraid of everything, basically. And when I drank, I wasn't afraid no more. So February 15th, I went in front of the judge for, again, I've been in front of judges all my life. And it was for a burglary charge, which was typical, assault, burglary, the possession, public intox, all these really, doing stuff like that was kind of a rite of manhood for my group, for the culture that I was involved in. But by this time, I had this beautiful little girl whose name is actually Brooke, who had my heart. I had never loved anybody like that, or had anybody, or trusted that. I mean, I know Mom loved me. I know she had, Big Brother, he loved me. I know I knew that I was loved, but I could never show love or accept that sort of expression of love for somebody else. But the power of addiction, February 15th, February 14th was my birthday. And I knew February 15th that I was going to prison, and I did. But take one guess, February 14th, because I know I'm going to prison. This is an example of the power of addiction, because I'm a drug addict too. Just take one guess, February 14th. Despite the fact that I had a family, I had this wonderful, beautiful relationship with this this little girl. Take one guess where I was at on my birthday, knowing that I'm going to prison the next day.
Yeah. You're out.
I was in probably one of the most stinking bars in all of Sioux City, Iowa, thinking that, of course, when it's your birthday, they buy you shots, and, but I wasn't, that's how selfish, or that's how sick. I don't want to offend anybody out there that's listening to this at all, because I love the people. But I'll tell you what, before I went out, and before that, I knew I was going to prison, but, I was out drinking, I was out doing drugs, I wasn't at home. But before that, I had to make it clear, hey, we're going to court tomorrow, and so let's do this, let's strategize this. We have to have a strategy. Even though I know I'm an alcoholic and drug addict, I have to strategize and use my family so the judge will go soft on me. So what happens was, of course, I have to say, put Brooke Ashley up front, so the judge will go light on me. He'll see those big brown eyes. He'll see that we love each other, and he'll go light on me. And what happened is during the court process, we loved each other so much. I was her hero, and she was my love. She was my great love. And she fell asleep. So, I'm so delusional in my thinking that she fell asleep right next to me that I'm literally trying to sort of telepathically get her to wake up, because, again, the judge has to go light on me. But it never occurred to me that she probably fell asleep because she was waiting for Daddy to come home on his birthday to open the gifts, to blow out the candles. But Daddy's an alcoholic, he's an addict, and that's more important than even the great love of his life.
That makes a good point. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there that have experienced what Brooke has experienced as a young child, this is something kind of personal. I guess I don't really share much about my personal history and with things like that, but just without too much detail, I was that person as a teenager, in a relationship. I was pregnant. I was a young mother. I was 17 years old when I got pregnant, and had my daughter when I was 18. But during that time, it's been a process throughout my life since that time, and I have forgiven a lot for myself to heal, and hoping that the other person will also heal. It's something that I pray about often, because we share a child, and I just there were a lot of times where the person that I was in a relationship with would leave, and it would be like, I'm gonna go hang out, and I'll be right back, and it's like days later, and I was that girl. I was that young girl, just in love, and I'm just like, oh, he'll be back, and just wishful thinking every single time. And I sat by the window. I don't know how many nights I would sit by the window, because how the house was faced, you could see the stretch coming into town, and just clear. And I would just sit all night and just sit and wait, and I would watch the cars go by. It would get dark in the middle of the night, then sun would come up, and I would watch and watch and watch, and I'm like, oh, I really hope that's him coming down the street. I really hope that's him coming back. And it, falling asleep, waiting, watching, and and then it's kind of like you get let down because that person doesn't come home. And it's something that I really struggled with for a long time, and I didn't realize it until later on in my life, and my other, in my other relationships that I had with just people in general. I know how that feels. If that's what, Brooke was experiencing, I know how that feels, because I was that young girl. I was that person that, waited and waited and waited, and just and always kind of praying, like, oh, I pray, I know what they're doing, and I hope that they're okay, because you always kind of think the worst, right, when people don't come home. And it's scary, to think about, things like that happening. And so, again, I really don't share a lot of my personal stories like that, but it is real. I want to share that I know that feeling, and it's real, and it's sad, and it's just, but yeah. So you're probably right about that. And anyways, I just wanted to share a little bit of self-disclosure there, which I don't really ever do, but I think it helps. It helps make this real, because a lot of times I think it's just stories to people sometimes, and it's like, well, if you haven't been through it, then I understand that, you might not really know how it feels, but it's not just stories, it's people's life experiences, and it affects us all in a different way. And so yeah, I just sharing that. I want to really quickly, I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Rosalind asks, Michael, have you ever worked on the reservation?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it had always been my dream to, when I was young, Mom's addiction was so much that we were forced into the foster care system. And so when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a social worker. I was being transported to another home. Back then, the Indian Child Welfare Act really wasn't kicking in. Well, not that well, anyways, never mind. I won't go there. But, I've worked in drug and alcohol specialists. I'm at my own reservation, the Hunkwan Reservation. I've also, after I sobered up, I started to want to do more than just steal, drink, drug, and hang out in bars and stuff like that. I started to have goals again. I started to have vision. Creator started to work with me. I started to have Creator in my life. And one of those was to go back to school, or is to go to school. What am I saying? When I was in prison, I got my GED, and I have been telling myself I was dumb all my life mainly because I could never see the chalkboard, and teachers didn't seem to really care. I don't think. Honestly, I don't think they care as much as they do now. But I could be wrong on that. I needed help. I needed help all my life. And nothing against teachers.
That was just your experience at the time as a, and you needed additional help. Were you sitting way in the back of the classroom, or did you have like issues with your vision? Do you remember?
I had issues with my vision, and so I couldn't see, and I was always too scared to speak at all times. Yeah. And so I would just draw, or I would fall asleep because of what was going on at home. But to answer your question, I went back to school, and I ended up becoming a youth specialist. And I also worked with the adults because they were so understaffed at a treatment facility on the Hunkwan Reservation. But I also worked for the Ponca Tribe of Nebraska as a case manager, and then most recently, prior to the job that I'm doing now, I also worked in the Native unit at the DHHS of Iowa Department of Health and Human Services as a caseworker, and prior to that as a tribal liaison. And right now I work strictly with Native men as well. So my career path certainly involves our people. But yes, on the reservation, I've lived on and off the reservation here and there, but I'm back in the city.
Okay. So really quickly though, that is something that our program on Standing Rock today is, we don't have enough men. We don't have enough men that are stepping forward, that are in recovery, and maybe they are, but we don't know who they are, or not having like community, not events, but like groups, meetings. I think there's a meeting somebody mentioned at the Catholic Church, but then somebody had made a comment and said that it's during a time of the day that people don't really want to be observed, going, like it should be anonymous, it should be private, and that person just didn't feel comfortable going anymore because of the change of time. But that's something that we're looking for, and creating partnerships with other men, even from other reservations or off reservation. Just, we really need our men in our communities and our families to be active and be a part of the family. And that's something that I've learned too, within my own kind of healing and my own training, even, with some of the programs that I have attended. And it's really important for our men to be involved and understand their roles in their families, in their communities, in their jobs, in whatever it may be. Getting back to that, and I think that's kind of part of my next question to you is it's about identity. and that's something that has come up several times when I have asked, what are some things that you feel are lacking in a program, or what are some things that you feel are contributing to, our youth or our men, our young men, kind of navigating in this way and and really being drawn towards using substances. And so, is that something that, in your own personal experience, that you can identify with, or that you have experience with, or had conversations about about identity with our men?
What can you say that?
Yeah.
Can you
so
rephrase that question?
Is that?
Can I get it? I don't know the game show thing.
No,
Can
I
get
know.
it?
So it's something that's been brought up as far as like, what do we think that, our people in our community, our young people, even not even just men, I guess I should not just focus on that, but what is something that our people have been struggling with, or are struggling with? And identity was always something that came up. Knowing our identity, I think a lot of times, in my experience, is growing up and not really knowing your identity. And for me, I can only speak for myself on this, but being, mixed race, and, having one parent that's non-Indian and having another parent who is Indian, and, being mixed, and like not really knowing like where you belong, and then feeling like you have to choose, who are you, and looking different than other people, and other people saying, well, you don't look this, but you don't really look that either, kind of like, what are you? And having to explain, or not really knowing like who you really are, and it's okay for me. I mean, I think I have accepted the fact that I am, multiracial, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just learning, how to accept yourself. And something that I've heard from other people is, like with our native population, is losing that identity through the boarding school era and all of that. It was stripped away, and our language is gone. No, it's not gone, but it was stripped away from the people that were, taken to these boarding schools a long time ago. And that's something that, I can identify with it through my grandmother. She also was taken to boarding school when she was very, very young. She didn't speak English. She spoke Mandan Hidatsa, and so like I can only imagine what that felt like as a 5, 6, 7-year-old little kid, and and going through that, and then just being totally stripped of who you are, and how that trickles down to today. And so really kind of had to go into it to explain it, but is that something that you had ever struggled with personally, is like identity, or has come up in your men's groups? Yeah,
absolutely. It seems as though the message was, and this isn't a figment of my imagination, you laid it out quite clearly. These are things that I didn't know about, but historically speaking, for a long time it was illegal to be Native American. And it's still relatively dangerous to be Native American anyway, if you look at the numbers. But certainly on a personal note, what I heard, it was quite blatant. Small town South Dakota was very blatant. It almost seemed like it was okay and normal to belittle a Native person, whether they were just walking down the street, or make them a target, or certainly in the schools, ignore a child, or that was kind of the norm. At least it was for me. And then so there's a lack of something there. There's a lack of encouragement. There's a lack of identity. There's a lack of a boy, just acknowledging that we exist. And then when there wasn't an acknowledgement, it was that there was something wrong with us. So I grew up around that. It was very real. It was abusive. It was dangerous. It was an assault on every single part of sensory system that I had. And I didn't have nothing to stand up for myself. I didn't have role models. The role models that I had were the ones that were actually the victims of that historical and cultural genocide and trauma. You know what I mean? So, and then the non-native population was just kind of, they were hearing it, that it's okay to mistreat native people. And so I grew up being completely ashamed at one time of who I was. And that was a big secret. I didn't want anybody to know that. And so I didn't really start, those are really sort of like recipes for complete lack of self-esteem, low self-esteem, suicidal thinking, alcoholism, addiction. If you take away something that is supposed to be there and put something that shouldn't be there, such as the truth, you know what I mean? I got to have something to feel good. And so myself, at a very young age, I displayed addiction tendencies already, growing up with the ism, with criminal thinking, etc., being completely isolated, feeling so different, and then to top it off, feeling ashamed of who I was, from the very core of who I was, feeling completely worthless and numb. I remember being 4 years old, being in a foster care, and being separated. That was trauma. So our people, just one layer of trauma right after the other. And, that's my background as well. And I remember very distinctly being about 4 or 5 years old, I was in another foster home. This is another one. And I didn't know where my brother was. I didn't know where mom was. I didn't know where my sister was. And I was staring out into the screen door, because I didn't know how to ask questions. I didn't know what was going on. Nobody was talking to me. And I remember at that time, life was so painful that I literally decided that I was going to numb myself. I was going to shut myself down. Now we're going to sort of like scientific speaking and just being human. Now we know that is a response. That there's a lot of depth to that. And now I know, looking back on it, is that when you shut yourself down, of course you're going to shut yourself down. It's too much for anybody to handle, no matter what age they are. And that is the recipe, the perfect recipe, the perfect storm for alcoholism. And so when I shut myself and I numbed myself off to the pain, I was also numbing myself off into being able to trust people, being able to recognize my own self-esteem, being able to accept kindness from other people. I was numbing myself off of the good things in life. And so that's why fear became so overwhelming. And when I drank, I didn't feel that way.
Yeah, and you make a really good point with that. I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't really know. I kind of know, but I kind of don't. Where that detachment started. Not being able to accept kindness or love or affection. Again, for myself personally, I don't know where that started. My parents were kind and good people, and we had a good home, we had a good life. Not everybody is perfect, but again, knowing that, I don't know where that started for myself personally. And it wasn't until later on in my life, like way later, when I was working, you know, I worked with CPS, both investigations and case management for a number of years, and I really learned a lot. You know, I always said that, you know, the parents and the children, they were my teachers. They're the ones that taught me even about myself. And I learned a lot, and I learned about, you know, that detachment disorder, and you know, why some children react this way or that way, or even parents, you know, being detached from their children, and the children not understanding, you know, why. Is it because, you know, mom or dad don't love me, or, you know, what is it? What's wrong with me? And that's something that, like, I have experienced with, you know, kids that I had worked with, just so often. And it's like, how do you explain that? You know, how do you explain that to a young child or even a teenager, you know? But just, it's a real thing. Again, you know, all of these things that we talk about, they're real. They're real feelings, they're real emotions. And it's just, I mean, a lot of us kind of go through that. And so you really bring up a lot of good stuff. And I'm like, oh, I could just talk about it all day long. But we do have another question. And let's see. Joelle had asked a couple of questions, but the first one is, it sounds like she is asking, mentality in the stages of recovery. So I'm not sure exactly, specifically what you're asking, Joelle, but is it like the different stages of mentality, like going through the process, like detox, the program, you know, in long-term recovery, or I'm not really sure what specifically the question is, but she had stated mentality in the stages of recovery.
I got to try and think like what she means by stages of recovery, but certainly there are definitely stages, because when you first come into recovery, like I'll just speak for my own experience, but my experience is kind of like it's not unusual. As a matter of fact, it's quite I guess I can't say normal, but a lot of people understand this. When I came into recovery, I didn't know how to do anything, because prior to my drinking, I didn't even know how to really speak up or to be myself or to cry without feeling like I was a big baby. All this really self-destructive self-talk. You know, it was very, very toxic. I don't even know what the right words is. But so when I entered into recovery, everything was new. I didn't even know how to brush my teeth on a regular basis. I didn't really know how to hold a job, let alone hold a job. I knew that I wanted to, but I didn't know how to even pray. I remember I was in prison, and I realized that I needed to have a prayer life. And so I asked the counselor, how do you pray? And so everything was new. So there are certain stages, because then there's your parenting stage. You know, you're newly sober. You're finding out more about your own life and how you're grieving, what you need to go through. Oftentimes when you're in recovery, you have to go to meetings. You have to satisfy the courts. You're getting your family back together, and at the same time, you're getting to know yourself sober. Like, I didn't even know how to talk sober. You give me some beer and some weed or anything, and man, we can talk all day. But when you get me sober, I'm just terrified to speak. And so when you're around a recovery program, you kind of hear that you're not alone. I was like that too. So it's kind of like, I suppose that there are probably, like what she said, but then it branches off into how to be a parent sober. Like one time I didn't even know how to attend my daughter's parent-teacher conferences, and I found a support system where, hey, we understand that. If I didn't have that support system, I wouldn't know how to deal with triggers. I wouldn't know how to deal with having money in my hand. And you typically, when I have money in my hand, is boom, straight to the bar. Boom, make that phone call. So, like, everyday things for a recovering alcoholic, Friday, Saturday night, storms, somebody yelling at you can trigger you into, so those can be described as stages, and then it sort of progresses. Okay, I've never been a student in a college before. I mean, I've been told I'm all dumb. I've never had a girlfriend sober. I've never danced with a girl sober. I've never even asked a girl out sober. I don't even know what that's like. You know, so you almost feel, then to top it off, then typically we kind of are used to making ourselves feel bad for feeling bad. So now we got the support system that is saying, you know what, you are in the right place. You know what, you showed up here sober today. We're so glad that you're here, so that inner self-talk starts to change. And that's definitely a stage that of recovery as well. How to go to a family function where there's drinking. When I first sobered up, I had to literally walk around like the block because my favorite bar was right there. And to somebody who really doesn't understand addiction, they might think, what's the big deal, you know, and maybe make fun of me, and that's going to make me want to go out and drink or do drugs because I'm going to say the heck with it. But you're somebody in recovery is going to say, I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, like I had to take a look at my anger, how I handled anger in my life. I'm used to putting a hole into the door, or to holding it in, and then exploding, or shaming myself for crying, for being a human. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So there are definitely a lot of stages in recovery, but certainly it's worth it. I mean, oh man, it's such a beautiful way of life. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, you know, touching on that piece that you're having to relearn or learn how to do things sober, right? And then I look at it from another perspective, you know, personally and then professionally, working with children and parents, you know, families having to get to know each other sober, because there are families out there who have, you know, for the duration of all of their children's lives, or some of their children's lives, they have not been sober. And so their children don't know them sober, and they don't know their children sober. And so it's something that when I worked in that field, that I talked about. I talked about it with my parents that I was working with. I talked about it with, you know, the kids that I worked with, you know, age appropriate, of course. And it's something that, you know, you don't automatically think of those things when you're working with families, or just even personally yourself. You're not thinking about that, you know, and having, just having to learn or relearn one another in a sober way. And that's hard, you know. Again, you know, maybe a little bit of self-disclosure, just, you know, in a relationship that I was in, you know, the person was alcoholic and used drugs, you know, as a way to continue to drink, binge drink, and, you know, for days and days. And so when they had decided to start their journey to recovery and be sober, it was so different for me, because I had already had that, I guess, PTSD experiencing, like, you know, come Wednesday, what's gonna happen? Are they gonna take off? Come Thursday, oh, they stayed, you know, Wednesday, okay, one more day. Come Thursday, man, I'm getting really shaky, I'm really nervous, I don't know if this person is going to, you know, start a fight or act up so they can leave or whatever the excuse was, right? And so sometimes they would leave on that day, sometimes they would leave on a Friday, and it's like, oh, I got one more day with this person. And it's like you stay in that because you care, you love this person or people, you know, and it's hard to leave that because you're like, oh, it's just like wishful thinking, right? You want change, but you can't change anybody. You know, they have to be willing to do that on their own. And so, but when that person had decided to make that change in their life, you know, I found myself expecting these certain events that usually would happen, you know, right in a row to happen, and they weren't happening. And I was, you know, it was so new to me, and I was just like, how come so-and-so isn't acting like this? Or, you know, I'm expecting this at this time and it's not happening. And I'm like finding myself getting anxiety over that, right? And then almost kind of like picking a fight on purpose. Like, I'm going to test them to see if this is real. And that's a real thing. Like, again, like these are real things that we go through. And this is something that, you know, we would talk about in like Families Anonymous or, you know, Al-Anon, things like that. Yeah, and just like, I'm going to push that person's buttons to see if they really mean it. And it's like, you don't even realize that you're doing it because you don't know each other, you know, anymore in a sober way, you know, because the pattern was there for so long. And so, yeah, I had to retrain my brain and really work on my end in that relationship to make it work. And it wasn't easy. It was tough because I had to get my mind out of that. I had to break out of my own triggers, right? And so it took a lot of work, definitely worth it in the end, you know. And so, but yeah, it doesn't come easy. And it doesn't come easy when you're a child either, you know. So going through that as a child, you don't really even know, you know, like all these different emotions and why things are happening, you know. And so that's why I say, like, you know, when I worked with children and families in CPS, social services, I that was something that I always brought up because, again, it's not automatically thought of, you know, having to relearn, you know, because sometimes I guess what I have experienced is parents going into recovery programs, and they're working their program and they're inviting their kids to, you know, these certain milestones in their program, and, you know, and then the kids don't want to go, or, you know, the kids get there. It could be from one extreme to the other, you know, and it's like the kids get there and they don't even know how to interact with the parent, and vice versa. And so really providing that education and providing that support, just knowing what that's like, I think is so important to our families. So I just wanted to bring that up because I just think it's really, really important, because you kind of touched on that. So let me see. Moving on, we do have another question from Joelle. She said, would you merge our traditions with a treatment center, and what would that look like? And so I know that we do have treatment programs that involve and kind of intertwine in our traditional ways, some of our ceremonies and things like that. And so I guess in your experience working in a treatment facility or working with people in that capacity, what does that look like in your experience?
Oh gosh, what that looks like is you know, when I was young, it's absolutely crucial. It's absolutely crucial that treatment centers. It's one thing for an alcoholic, somebody in recovery, to finally reach out for help. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that typically we're not used to, and then we've cried wolf for so long, you know, and then we start to believe that, oh, well, this isn't real this time. So I know from my own experience and from my career and even my personal experience now working with men and working with both in my job and connecting with men and women that are new in recovery, that there is nothing like being able to dance for the first time with your children at a powwow, or to listen to your own culture or somebody speak to it, or even just to have that conversation, to feel safe enough and open up enough to be able to say, you know what, I'm in Hongtuan and I really want to get to know who I am. I really want to find out what goes on in that lodge. I want to find out about my grandmas and grandpas. I want to feel good about myself, and I want to be able to pray. I want to be able to pray the way that the grandmas and grandpas pray. I want to be able to, like, now that I'm sober, I have all this time, and now I'm getting to know what's in my heart too. And my heart is really kind of crying out, and has been for a long time. And now that I'm sober, I can, I feel like that's really strong coming on there. And so, like, just being able to, myself, I don't like to try and out Indian anybody. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel ashamed and not know any of my culture, not know any of my language, and keep it a secret. So when somebody says something, I honor that. It's almost like I love them for opening up like that, because they opened up. And so I know what that's like. So I'm just, when somebody needs to touch a drum, or to hit the drum for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a long time, maybe the first time sober, or to smudge, or go pick sweetgrass, or some traditional medicines, or some tinsila, or just to go outside and pray, just so much. It's just, it's what it cannot be understated. I just came from a meeting in Portland, and there was young people there. They all had hand drums, and I got to sit there and listen to them. I about come down into tears because they were young. I'm 51, and to see these young people, you could see it on their face. That drum was really cleansing the room, and it was cleansing our hearts, and we were together. That drum, those hand drums, and it's and I know there's somebody over there in the corner somewhere that's probably saying, "Oh, I don't know nothing about that." And when we provide a safe space and open up that talk, then that person will take that big leap, that big trusting jump into saying, "You know what? I grew up like that, and I don't know anything about. I've never heard myself say that, and I've never said it out loud."
Yeah.
So for somebody to feel safe enough to do that, the grandmas and grandpas are over there saying, like wanting us to love them, and so even the ones that are out. We pray for them, and we sing for them too, and so my heart is full, but my heart is broken too. But I'm learning, how to deal with that.
Yeah, and that's again, you make a really good point. People that are trying to figure out who they are and what is their identity. What's my identity? And like you might know where you come from, but you don't necessarily know the language, the traditions, the what the right or wrong things to go about, because I think just being really mindful of that. And if somebody is there wanting to learn and they're trying to figure themselves out, and they may not know the right way of that tribe or the clan, or however it goes, like offering tobacco, or just that kind of way, gotta, pardon each other, be sensitive about that, be aware of, this person is still trying to learn and figure out who they are. And so, just being mindful of that, not shaming somebody because they didn't know, take that as an opportunity to educate, to help somebody learn about who they are, instead of shaming them and being like, yeah, you should have did it this way. And, I'm not going to talk to you because you didn't, whatever, and it's just like, I always look at those as teaching opportunities. And so just, putting it out there, just be really mindful of things like that, because it may deter somebody, or just kind of, they may shut down again and take them a long time, if any, to kind of come back and want to revisit that, right? So just throwing that out there, just, be really mindful about where people are in their recovery, and even just in their life, period, learning about who they are. So, I don't, we've been talking for a long time, and I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. I haven't seen anything pop up. Rosalind did say, thank you for sharing. We cannot do this work of being human alone, and I agree, we need each other. Just like the other day, I had made a post, and it was raining, and we've had such a dry spell here in the plains, and I said, just like how the earth needs water, needs rain, is how we need each other to continue to live and grow and learn and all of that. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you're traveling, and I really, 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 really appreciate everything that you shared with us today. I'm sure there's people out there that may watch this later on, and they're like, well, this guy gets me. I maybe it is time that I kind of look into what my options are as far as recovery, or maybe just anything, and so I really appreciate your time. I don't know if you have any questions or anything you'd like to say just in closing, and I
guess I'd just like to share my gratitude to anybody out there that's listening that might be going through a hard time with drugs or alcohol, or maybe you're sobering up and feeling, like you want to reach out. You can always look me up. My name is Michael. My full name is Maxon-Pacheco Gadeska Okada. That's my full legal name. That's my legal name. But on Facebook, I go by Maxon-Pacheco O'Connor. Please friend me, because just trying to make that connection. And also, if you need some support, because when somebody reaches out for help, because at one time I reached out for help. So I know that, I know that a lot of people out there, we know that we have family members that are in active addiction as well. And so I know that if you were in my place, you would if it was switched around, you would help me. And so so anybody can get a hold of me, or go on the Relatives in Recovery site, Facebook page, or just hit me up as Maxon-Pacheco O'Connor on Facebook, and I could see you and see what you're doing and encourage you, and you could do the same, and we can be relatives. So I just, I'm very thankful, because the things that we're talking about, this conversation are healing, and so that's a good way to start, is to start opening up and having these conversations. And so that's why, Brooklyn, when you said that, I was just like, oh yeah, I'll be so thankful to have a discussion. When somebody reaches out for help, they're blessing us. They're doing something that is very, very difficult.
Yes.
And so myself, I honor that, and I know you do too, and I know that the grandmas and grandpas will honor that as well and make that sacred connection into that way of life. So yeah, boy, I wish so much to say, but just very thankful that I can be with everybody today in this kind of way. And if you're going through a hard time, boy, I tell you what, I'm right there with you. I'm with you, as a relative.
Well, again, from my lodge to your lodge to all of you out there, to your lodges, I want to say thank you. And, Creator be with you on your travels. Be safe. Everybody else out there, Creator be with you. Always listening. There's no right or wrong way to pray. Remember that. It's a conversation. So Creator is always there. And have the conversations. And again, I just want to thank all of you for tuning in. And if you have any questions, feel free to message myself or Michael. I did add him. You can click on his name in our event. And so if you have a hard time finding him on Facebook, you can do that. And so thank you. And again, travel safe. All right. And we will see you all next week for Recovery Roundtable. Thanks. See you.
Oh, bye.
Bye.